Welcome to Hollywood Graveyard. Today I turn the camera over to you, the Hollywood Graveyard community, as we travel the world to visit famous and historical graves in your neck of the woods. In this tour we travel through the American South to find legends like Leslie Nielsen, Donna Douglas, Jackie Gleason, Little Richard, and many more. My friends, the time is yours. Having wrapped up our explorations of the American Midwest, we turn our compass now to the South, to visit the American South. On the itinerary today are Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. All right, off we go. We begin today as far south as you can go in the continental US, to the Sunshine State, Florida. This is Evergreen Cemetery in Fort Lauderdale. Here we find a legend of comedy, Leslie Nielsen. The Canadian-born actor didn't start out in comedy. His career began in very early television on anthology dramas like Studio One and science fiction like Tales of Tomorrow. His breakout film role was as Commander Adams in the landmark 1956 film Forbidden Planet. He had almost no comedy under his belt when he was cast as Dr. Hlubek in the 1980 comedy Airplane. It would be a major turning point for Nielsen, and something of a second career when, in his 50s, he became known as a deadpan comic. Nobody did absurdist comedy played perfectly straight better than Leslie Nielsen.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
He followed up Airplane with Police Squad, which would become the popular Naked Gun film series. He continued to make us laugh right up until the end, passing away from pneumonia at age 84. But Leslie ensured the laughs wouldn't die with him, leaving us one last joke here on his grave. It's quite common to see the letters R.I.P. on a grave marker. Rest in peace, right? Well, usually. But Mr. Nielsen's epitaph, Let her rip, means something entirely different. Throughout his later life, he was known for his love of a good fart joke. He even carried a little fart machine around with him wherever he went, so he could let one rip whenever it was most comedically expedient.
It's just a prop. We use it in an airplane, and I have so much fun with it, so I just carry it around with me. You know?
Yeah, okay.
So, Leslie Nielsen, who dedicated much of his life to making us laugh, ensured his final act would do just that, with a good fart joke. Thanks for the laughs, Leslie. Also here at Evergreen is the tomb of Wayne Huizenga. He was a businessman known for founding entities like AutoNation and Waste Management. In the 1980s, Huizenga became co-owner of Blockbuster Video and would help grow the company from just a handful of locations to a multi-billion-dollar business with thousands of locations globally, the top movie rental business. He would use his wealth to bring sports teams to South Florida, the Florida Marlins, and the Florida Panthers. Huizenga died from cancer at age 80. This tranquil spot is found at Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens in Fort Lauderdale. Here is the crypt of Rocky Marciano. He was a professional boxer in the 40s and 50s, who reigned as heavyweight champion from 1952 to 1956. He was the only heavyweight champion to retire undefeated with 49 wins, 0 losses. His career knockout-to-win ratio of 87.8% remains one of the highest in boxing history. Today, he ranks among the all-time greats. In August 1969, Rocky was a passenger aboard a Cessna heading to Des Moines. The plane encountered adverse weather conditions and crashed, killing all aboard, including Rocky Marciano. He was 45. Our Lady of Mercy Catholic Cemetery provides a beautiful lakeside backdrop for the grave of one of television's biggest legends, Jackie Gleason. Known affectionately as the Great One, Jackie Gleason was a multi-talented actor, writer, comedian, and musician whose career on film, television, stage, and radio spanned a half-century. Ascending the stairs of his sarcophagus, we pass by an inscription of one of his catchphrases. And away we go! He shot to fame on television in the early 1950s with The Jackie Gleason Show. This would spawn the show The Honeymooners, in which Gleason played his best-known character, the blustery, short-tempered bus driver, Ralph Cramden. The Honeymooners would set the stage for many sitcoms to come, including an animated one, The Flintstones. Jackie also had notable film roles, including an Oscar-nominated role in The Hustler and Buford T. Justice in Smokey and the Bandit. And in the 50s and 60s, he produced a number of best-selling albums. Jackie Gleason died from cancer at age 71. Hopping over to the western coast of Florida in Sarasota brings us to the opulent seaside villa known as Zant, former home of a circus impresario. This historic landmark is now a museum that hosts not only the treasures of the man's legacy, but the treasures of the man himself, John Ringling. In the 1870s, John and his brothers began putting on vaudeville-style shows in Wisconsin. Within a few years, they would be able to open their own circus, dubbed the Ringling Brothers United Monster Shows, Great Double Circus, Royal European Menagerie, Museum Caravan, and Congress of Trained Animals. Ooh, that's quite a mouthful. By the turn of the century, they were traveling on railroads as one of the largest shows in the country, and would buy out their major competitor, Barnum and Bailey Circus, in 1907. By the end of 1918, the two circuses merged into one massive show, Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, which operated until 2017. John and his wife Mabel made their home here. Mabel was an art collector who, with her husband, created the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art, on the grounds of which they are buried. John was the longest living of the Ringling brothers, dying from pneumonia at age 70. Mabel was just 54 when she died from Addison's disease and diabetes. They were originally entombed in temporary vaults in New Jersey until family disputes could be resolved. In 1991, 55 years after John's death, they were exhumed and finally interred here on the grounds of the museum. Heading over to nearby Minnesota Memorial Park, we find another of the Ringling brothers, Charles Ringling. Charles would become the operating manager in charge of production for the Ringling Brothers Circus. Charles was also one of the early developers of the Sarasota area. He died shortly after turning 63. He had this mausoleum built with marble to resemble his house. Continuing our adventures under the big top, here too we find aerialists supreme, the Flying Wallendas. They were a family of daredevil circus performers known for performing high-wire acts, often without safety nets. Among the Wallenda performers resting here are Jenny, Carla, Mario, Martha, Helen, and patriarch Carl Wallenda. Carl formed the Great Wallendas in Europe in the early 1900s and soon found his way to the States after being hired by John Ringling. They were particularly famous for their 7-person high-wire pyramid. While performing this stunt in 1962, the pyramid collapsed, killing 2 members and leaving Carl's son Mario paralyzed. Carl himself would meet a similar fate years later. In 1978, at age 73, Carl attempted to walk between 2 10-story towers in Puerto Rico on a high wire without a safety net. High winds kicked in as he attempted to cross and he lost his balance and fell to his death. Our next Florida stop is Trinity Memorial Gardens. Here we find a legend of baseball, George Steinbrenner. He was owner and managing partner of the New York Yankees from 1973 until his death in 2010. He was the longest-serving owner in club history, and the Yankees won 7 World Series championships and 11 American League pennants under his ownership. Steinbrenner's personality and managing style were famously caricatured on the popular sitcom Seinfeld. George Steinbrenner died from a heart attack in 2010 at age 80. Crossing back over to the east, we reach Daytona Memorial Park. Here rests baseball star Napoleon Lajoie, aka Larry Lajoie, aka the Frenchman. He was a professional baseball player in the early 20th century, playing in Cleveland and Philadelphia. He's been called the best second baseman in the history of baseball, and led the league in batting average many times in his career. So popular was he, one of the teams he played for changed their name from the Cleveland Broncos to the Cleveland Napoleons. Knapp was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1937 and lived to be 84. This is Rosemary Cemetery in Bronson. It's hard to miss the iconic marker to an icon of blues and rock and roll, Bo Diddley. With his signature rectangle guitar, Bo Diddley was a pioneering guitarist, singer, and songwriter in the 1950s. His style and signature beats would be influential in the development of rock and roll in that era, and inspire future artists like the Rolling Stones and Buddy Holly. This led to him being known as the originator. One of his best-known songs is alluded to right here on his marker.
I'm a man. I spell M-A.
Bo would be inducted into the Rock and Roll, Blues, and R&B Halls of Fame. He died from heart failure at age 79. his last words being that he was going to heaven. Proceeding north, we reach Middleburg Methodist Church Cemetery. Here lies Slim Whitman. He was a country music artist known for his yodeling and singing in high falsetto. He was prolific in his musical output, releasing over 100 albums and some 500 recorded songs. In the 1950s, he toured with Elvis as his opening act. He would also be a major influence on artists like the Beatles. Slim's music would be introduced to a new generation in 1996 when his song Indian Love Call became the means of defeating the aliens in the film Mars Attacks. Slim Whitman died from heart failure at age 90. Continuing our exploration of Florida's music legacy, we've arrived in Jacksonville and Jacksonville Memorial Gardens. Here we find monuments to the legendary but tragic Lynyrd Skynyrd. Steve Gaines joined Lynyrd Skynyrd in 1976 to replace departing guitarist Ed King. He'd performed guitar and vocals on 2 of the band's albums, One More for the Road and Street Survivors. But just days after the release of Street Survivors, on October 20th, 1977, Steve was aboard a plane with other band members when it crashed outside of Gillsburg, Mississippi. The crash claimed his life at age 28, along with other band members, including lead vocalist Ronnie Van Zant. Also aboard the plane was Steve's sister, Cassie, who was not only a backup vocalist for Lynyrd Skynyrd, but had recommended her brother Steve join the band. Cassie was 29. You'll also find here the original burial site of Ronnie Van Zant, but in 2000, vandals broke in and disturbed the graves here, so Steve's ashes were removed by the family to a private location, and Ronnie's remains were relocated a few miles away. To find Ronnie's current resting place, we head north to Riverside Memorial Park. Ronnie Van Zant was the lead vocalist, primary lyricist, and founding member of the southern rock band Lynyrd Skynyrd, which formed in the late 1960s. That's Ronnie you hear singing on their iconic track, Sweet Home Alabama.
Sweet home Alabama, where the skies are blue.
In 1977, Ronnie was aboard the same flight as Steve Gaines en route to Baton Rouge for their next show, when due to pilot error, the plane ran out of gas. The pilot attempted an emergency landing but smashed into a tree, killing several on board, wounding others. Ronnie died on impact at age 29. As mentioned, he was originally interred at Jacksonville Memory Gardens, but in June 2000, Van Zant's unopened casket and Gaines's urn and ashes were discovered on the grounds of the cemetery, having been dug up. So his family had him relocated here, secured in a concrete vault. Another member of the band rests just feet away, Leon Wilkeson. He played bass for Lynyrd Skynyrd beginning in 1972 until his death in 2001. Leon was aboard the plane that claimed his bandmates' lives, sitting right next to Steve. He was severely injured, but survived. His injuries required him to then hold his bass at a near vertical orientation, as seen here on his grave. Leon was just 49 when he died in his sleep, suffering from chronic liver and lung disease. His epitaph is an allusion to their song, Free Bird.
'Cause I'm as free as a bird now.
Another southern rock icon is in these grounds, Dave Hlubek. He was lead guitarist and founding member of the band Molly Hatchet, which formed in the early 70s. Among their biggest hits is 1980's Flirtin' with Disaster.
I'm traveling down the road, I'm flirting with disaster.
Dave left the band in 1987, but would rejoin in 2005, performing until his death at age 66. Where am I off to next, Gladys Knight and the Pips?
He's leaving on that midnight train to Georgia.
Leaving on the midnight train.
That midnight train has pulled into the station here in Georgia. Our first stop here is Rose Hill Cemetery in Macon, where we continue our reveries of southern rock through the graveyards of the Southland. In this gated area we find members of the Allman Brothers Band. Duane Allman formed the Allman Brothers Band in 1969 with brother Gregg. The band achieved great success in the early 70s. Duane was particularly remembered for his slide guitar playing and improvisational skills, but Duane's tenure with the band would be brief. On October 29, 1971, Duane died from injuries sustained in a motorcycle accident. He was 24. Close to Duane is his brother, Gregg Allman, co-founder of the Allman Brothers Band. He played guitar, keyboards, sang, and was the principal songwriter for the band. He wrote many of their hits, like Whipping Post and Midnight Rider. Gregg would rank among the great rock pioneers and vocalists, and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He died from liver cancer at age 69. Nearby is Butch Trucks. He was the drummer of the Allman Brothers Band, beginning with their formation in 1969. Through the band's various incarnations, Butch Trucks was one of the constants over the band's decades-long career. Trucks died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in 2017 at age 69. At the other end of this garden section is another founding member, Berry Oakley. He played bass in the band, and in his short career would be ranked among the great bass players in rock, known for long melodic bass runs. But in a tragic parallel to his former bandmate Duane, Berry Oakley died from injuries of a motorcycle accident, just blocks from where Duane had died 1 year before. He too was 24. Moving on now to Tennessee Georgia Memorial Park in Rossville, we find a wrestler named Terry Bam Bam Gordy. He was one of the original Fabulous Freebirds, a popular wrestling team in the 80s. Among the many championships held by Gordy are the Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship and the WCW World Tag Team Championship. He was just 40 when he died from a heart attack. Terry Gordy would be posthumously inducted into the Professional Wrestling and WWE Halls of Fame. This scenic view comes to us from Laurel Grove Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia. Here lies the woman who brought us the Girl Scouts, Juliette Lowe. While living in the UK, she met Robert Baden-Powell and was introduced to his Boy Scouts program. She became involved in the Girl Guides in Scotland before returning to Georgia to spread the Girl Scouting movement here. In 1912, she formed the Girl Guides to help girls learn practical skills and build character. In 1913, the organization's name was changed to Girl Scouts. Juliette died from cancer at age 66. She was buried in her Girl Scouts uniform, and hundreds of Girl Scouts left school early to attend her funeral. Here in the grounds of St. Jane's Episcopal Cemetery rests a tragic figure of the beauty pageant world, JonBenet Ramsey. By the tender age of 6, JonBenet had won a handful of child beauty pageants, like Little Miss Colorado and National Tiny Miss Beauty. But the unthinkable would happen Christmas Day in 1996. The morning after Christmas, JonBenet was missing, and a ransom note was discovered claiming to have her and demanding $118,000 for her return. The police were called, but hours later her body was discovered in the basement by her father. She had been strangled and suffered a blow to the head. Before the crime scene could be documented, Mr. Ramsey removed her body. This and other missteps early in the investigation led to difficulties in solving the case, a case which quickly garnered national attention, becoming one of the most high-profile child homicides in recent history. All members of the Ramsey family have been cleared by the DA, but to date no one has been charged in JonBenet's murder, and the case remains unsolved. Our last Georgia stop is Waco Baptist Church Cemetery, where we find the grave of Evelyn Keyes. One of the greatest films associated with Georgia is 1939's Gone with the Wind. Evelyn had a role in that film, playing Sue Ellen O'Hara, Scarlett's sister. Other memorable film roles include as Betty in Here Comes Mr. Jordan, Susan in The Prowler, and Helen in The 7-Year Itch. She semi-retired in 1956, but made a few more appearances, mainly on television, including a few appearances on Murder, She Wrote. Evelyn died from cancer at age 91. She was cremated. A portion of her ashes not gone with the wind were interred here. Hopping the border northeast, we've arrived now in South Carolina. Let's begin our time here at Union Family Life Cemetery in Lugoff. We've left Georgia behind, but our next star sang of rainy nights in Georgia. Brook Benton was a singer and songwriter who found popularity in the 50s and 60s with rock and roll and R&B music. He found his second wind in 1970 with the ballad Rainy Nights in Georgia. Throughout his career, he had over 50 songs hit the Billboard charts. Benton died from spinal meningitis and pneumonia at age 56. This is Green Lawn Memorial Park in Columbia. Here is the fabulous monument to the fabulous Moolah, a pioneer of women's wrestling. Born Mary Lillian Ellison, she began her wrestling career in the 40s. In 1956, she won the Women's Championship of the World, a title she would go on to hold for the next 28 years. This would make her the longest reigning title holder in women's wrestling. In 1995, she'd become the first woman inducted into the WWF Hall of Fame. The fabulous Moolah died at age 84 and remains the most dominant figure in the history of female wrestling. Next to Moolah is fellow wrestler and friend Mae Young. Like Moolah, Mae Young was one of the earliest superstars of women's wrestling. Mae began wrestling in the 30s and never slowed down, wrestling into the 2010s when she was in her 80s, giving her the unique distinction of having wrestled in 9 different decades. She was known for her comedic performances, often teaming up with her friend, the fabulous Moolah, on WWE televised events. Mae lived to be 90 and was inducted into various halls of fame, including the WWE Hall of Fame. Moving on now to Woodlawn Memorial Park in Greenville, we find the legendary Shoeless Joe Jackson. He was an outfielder who played baseball in the major leagues in the early 1900s. His nickname came from a game in South Carolina when a new pair of cleats gave him painful blisters, so he went up to bat without any shoes on. At the height of his career, he was one of the most popular and talented players in the game. His batting average for a rookie season is a record that still stands over a century later. But his career was abruptly halted in his prime due to his association with the Black Sox scandal, in which the 1919 Chicago White Sox participated in a conspiracy to fix the World Series. Jackson's guilt and involvement in the scandal have been widely debated over the years, but in the end it led to him being banned from playing professional baseball. He would spend the rest of his career playing, often under assumed names, for semi-professional teams in the South. Shoeless Joe died from a heart attack in 1951. He's been portrayed in films like Field of Dreams and 8 Men Out. Our next star is a man who literally reached for the stars. Dr. Ronald E. McNair Memorial Park is in Lake City and is the eternal home of its namesake, Ronald McNair. He was a physicist and astronaut, the second black man to fly in space. He flew his first mission aboard Challenger in 1984. 2 years later, he would be aboard Challenger once again. Tragically, Challenger exploded 73 seconds after takeoff, killing all 7 crew members, including McNair. He was 35. McNair was initially interred at Rose Lawn Cemetery here in Lakeview, but in 2004 moved to this memorial park created in his honor. The History Center here on the grounds has a unique significance in the life of McNair. As a youngster here in Lake City, the inquisitive Ronald tried to check out science books from the local library, which was segregated at the time. Told no black people were allowed, he was denied access to the books, but refused to leave. Police and his mother were called, but he was eventually allowed to check out the books. Decades later, the building where this library was housed now bears his name. This story was made into a children's book, Ron's Big Mission. Our last South Carolina stop brings us to St. Luke's AME Church Cemetery in Sumter. This is where Bill Pinkney is laid to rest. He was a singer, the longest surviving original member of the band The Drifters, which rose to popularity in the 50s and 60s. Bill was with the group in the 50s and helped craft their early sound. Among the early Drifters hits Bill performed on is 1953's Money Honey. The group also did a popular rendition of Irving Berlin's White Christmas. Bill Pinkney left the group in 1958, but later reformed it as the original Drifters. He continued to perform throughout his life to keep the sound of the Drifters alive, and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988. Bill died from a heart attack at age 81. Let's visit our friends to the north, in North Carolina. Black Bottom Cemetery is in Belhaven. Here lies Little Eva. She was a singer who rose to popularity in the 1960s. As a teenager, she was working as a maid for songwriting duo Carole King and Jerry Goffin. In 1962, they asked Eva to sing and record one of the songs they had written. The song was Locomotion, which became a huge hit.
Everybody's doing a brand new dance now. Come on, baby, do the locomotion. So come on, do the locomotion with me.
Eva had other hits in this era, including Keep Your Hands Off My Baby and Let's Turkey Trot. Her career dwindled by the 70s and she retired from performing until a Kylie Minogue cover of Locomotion renewed interest in her, and she took up singing again on the cabaret and oldies circuit. Eva died from cancer at age 59 and is now singing with the Angels. William Greer's grave is found at Green Hill Cemetery in Waynesville. He was a U.S. Secret Service agent, best known for being the driver of the limousine that carried President Kennedy through Dallas, Texas, when he was assassinated in 1963. After shots rang out in Dealey Plaza and Kennedy was hit, Greer sped the president to nearby Parkland Hospital, where he later died. Greer died from cancer at age 75. Our next North Carolina stop is in Charlotte and Forest Lawn West Cemetery. Here lies a famous pair of Siamese twins, Daisy and Violet Hilton. They were born in England in 1908, conjoined at the hip. From a young age, they were exhibited in pubs as the Brighton United Twins. Soon they'd be traveling the world performing, eventually landing in the US, where they'd add dancing and music to their performing repertoire. But the twins were essentially held captive by their managers, so they sued for and won emancipation. Taking control of their own careers as performers, the twins found success on the vaudeville and burlesque stages as the Hilton Sisters Revue. They would also appear in two films, 1932's Freaks and Chained for Life in 1952. After performing opportunities dwindled, Daisy and Violet worked the rest of their lives at a local grocery store. In January 1969, after they failed to report to work, a welfare check was requested and the twins were found dead in their home, victims of the 1968 flu pandemic. Daisy died first, and Violet died 2 to 4 days later. This is Westview Memorial Park, where rests a wrestler known as Junkyard Dog. He was born Sylvester Ritter, and in the 1980s would become one of Mid-South's and the WWF's most charismatic and electrifying wrestlers. His headlining cards would draw huge crowds, and though he never won a WWF title, he was a fan favorite. Junkyard Dog died in a single car accident in Mississippi at just 45. He was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. We're in Waynesville now and Green Hill Cemetery. This grave reads Byron Barr, but you cinephiles know him as Gig Young, a stage name he adopted from the character he played in 1942's The Gay Sisters. Gig found considerable success as an actor in the 40s through the 60s. He was thrice nominated for an Oscar, winning in 1970 for They Shoot Horses, Don't They? He would also make frequent appearances on television, including on the iconic Twilight Zone episode Walking Distance, and a regular role as Tony Fleming on The Rogues. Gig's worsening alcoholism cost him roles, losing out on films like Blazing Saddles and shows like Charlie's Angels. On October 19, 1978, 3 weeks after his marriage to his fifth wife, the couple were found dead in their Manhattan apartment. Gig had shot and killed his wife, then shot himself. He was 64, and no motive has ever been determined for the murder-suicide. Moving on to Forest Lawn East Cemetery in Weddington, in the Columbarium of Compassion, we find the niche of actress Lisa Robin Kelly. She was a familiar face on television in the 90s, with a regular role on Days of Our Lives as Jill, and making appearances in shows like The X-Files and Married with Children. But her best-known role is that of Lori Foreman, in some 50 episodes of the popular comedy That 70s Show. Substance abuse began to take their toll on her life and career. Days after checking into a rehab facility in California, Lisa died in her sleep from multiple drug intoxication. She was 43. Our last North Carolina stop is Wake Forest Cemetery and the grave of Tommy Byrne. He was a Major League Baseball player in the 1940s and 50s, playing much of his career for the New York Yankees. He was a left-handed pitcher who would win 2 World Series with the Yankees in 1949 and 1956. After baseball, Byrne would become mayor of Wake Forest. He lived to be 87.
Pardon me, boy.
Yes?
Is that the Chattanooga choo-choo?
That is the Chattanooga Choo-Choo, which means that we've arrived in Tennessee. Let's begin our time here in Chattanooga and Forest Hill Cemetery. This is the grave of Grace Moore. The actress and singer got her start in musical theater on Broadway, but soon moved into opera, becoming well known as an operatic soprano. Grace would become known as the Tennessee Nightingale. At the advent of sound pictures, Hollywood would bring her talents to the screen, playing Jenny Lind, the Swedish Nightingale, in A Lady's Morals. Among her best-known films are When You're in Love and One Night of Love, for which Grace was nominated for an Academy Award. Marking yet another tragic death in an aviation accident in this series, Grace Moore died in a plane crash near Copenhagen, Denmark, in 1947. Here too is a baseball player named Jackie Mitchell. She was one of the very first women signed to play professional baseball. She signed as a pitcher with the Chattanooga Lookouts in 1931. That April, she pitched in an exhibition game against the New York Yankees. In that game, she famously struck out both Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig in succession. The legend of the woman who struck out two of baseball's greatest hitters lives on to this day. We're in Clarksville now and Greenwood Cemetery. This is the grave of Charles Watts. He was a prolific supporting actor in the 50s and 60s. He played Judge Whiteside in Giant and Ned in An Affair to Remember. And you saw him quite a few times on TV shows like Dennis the Menace, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Watts died from cancer at age 54. In section 12, near the road, we find the grave of Frank Sutton. He was an actor whose best-known role is that of Gunnery Sergeant Vince Carter on some 150 episodes of the 60s comedy Gomer Pyle, USMC. He appeared in many of the other great shows of the era, like The Untouchables and Love American Style. And on the big screen, he can be seen in films like Marty and The Satan Bug. Frank died of a heart attack at just 50. Woodall Cemetery is also here in Clarksville. This is where Mel Tillis is laid to rest. He was a country music singer and songwriter, finding his greatest success in the 70s as part of the outlaw country movement. He had a number of top 10 hits like I Ain't Never and Good Woman Blues. Among Mel's many honors are induction into the Country Music and Nashville Songwriters Halls of Fame, and being named Entertainer of the Year by the Country Music Association. Not only would his songs appear in numerous film and TV productions, Mel himself would also appear in films like Smokey and the Bandit 2 and The Cannonball Run. Mel died from respiratory failure at age 85. This is Edgefield Missionary Baptist Church Cemetery. An Olympic legend rests in these grounds, Wilma Rudolph. She was a track and field athlete who competed in the 1956 and 1960 Olympic Games. She won bronze with the 4x100 team in 1956, and at the 1960 Games, Wilma won 3 golds in the 100, 200, and 4x100. She gained worldwide fame as the fastest woman in the world, and was the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in a single Olympic Games. She became a role model for young black athletes and helped elevate women's track and field nationwide. Wilma was just 54 when she died from cancer. She would be inducted into numerous halls of fame, including the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame and the National Women's Hall of Fame. This quiet cemetery in rural Tennessee is Mount Carmel Cemetery. Resting here is a giant of women's basketball, Pat Summitt. She coached the University of Tennessee Lady Vols basketball team from 1974 to 2012, accruing over 1,000 wins over her career, the most in college basketball history. The team would win 8 national championships under her leadership. As a player, Pat won a silver medal at the 1976 Olympics, and then would coach the gold medal winning team at the 1984 Olympics. She was named the Naismith Basketball Coach of the Century in 2000, and was inducted into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame in 1999. Pat suffered from Alzheimer's later in life, passing away at age 64. Another quiet rural cemetery in our travels through Tennessee is Cave Creek. In these grounds is an intriguing figure in local folklore, Felix Bush Brazil. His claim to fame is inscribed right here on his tombstone. In his later years, Uncle Bush, as he was known, figured it was a shame that none of us will ever know what is said about us at our funeral. So on that note, he decided to throw his own preemptive funeral. He felled a big black walnut tree, constructed his own coffin out of it, and put plans in motion to put on a funeral party while he was still alive so he could enjoy it. The plans were reported in the local newspaper, which was picked up by the Associated Press. Through the media buzz generated, it's estimated that some 8,000 to 12,000 people attended the funeral from some 14 states. At the service, Bush was seated in front of the coffin while hymns were sung and the pastor gave a sermon for the living corpse. He called the sermon the finest he had ever heard, and his was believed to be the largest funeral held in Tennessee at that time. The story would naturally inspire a film, Get Low, starring Robert Duvall as Felix. We've arrived in Nashville, Music City. We found quite a few country music stars here in our first viewers special, but there's always more to find. Like Keith Whitley, here at Spring Hill Cemetery. The country music singer and songwriter only recorded 2 albums, but charted numerous hit singles in the 80s, like Don't Close Your Eyes and When You Say Nothing at All.
Yeah, you say it best when you say nothing at all.
Keith was just 34 when he died from acute alcohol poisoning. Also here at Spring Hill, we find a wife and husband famous in the country music scene, Kitty Wells and Johnny Wright. Kitty Wells was a pioneering woman in country music, having broken down barriers with her 1952 hit recording, It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels. The song would top the charts, a first for a female singer, making Kitty Wells country's first female superstar.
It wasn't God who made honky tonk angels.
Her chart-topping hits continued into the 60s, and she would rank among the top vocalists and most successful female artists in country history. In 1976, Kitty Wells was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. The Queen of Country Music died after a stroke at age 92. Kitty was married to Johnny Wright, also a country musician. He spent much of his career working with Jack Anglin as the duo Johnny and Jack. Among Johnny's hits are the song Hello Vietnam, used in the opening of the movie Full Metal Jacket. He and Kitty also recorded a duet, We'll Stick Together. Johnny died of natural causes at age 97, just 10 months before his wife of 73 years passed. We're back at Hendersonville Memory Gardens, where rest legends like Johnny Cash and June Carter, who we visited previously. Here too we find the grave of Merle Kilgore. He's remembered as a songwriter in the country music scene. In fact, with June Carter, Merle co-wrote Ring of Fire for Johnny Cash.
I fell into a burning ring of fire.
Other hits he wrote include Wolverton Mountain and The Folk Singer. Later in life, he would be Hank Williams Jr.'s manager. He died from heart failure while undergoing treatment for lung cancer at the age of 70. Let's head to the Sermon on the Mount section to find another country music star, Ferlin Husky. The versatile country music singer and songwriter found success in the 60s and 70s. His epitaph, Gone Home on the Wings of a Dove, is a clever aggregate of 2 of his biggest hits, Gone and Wings of a Dove. He'd also make appearances in films like Swamp Girl and Hillbillies in a Haunted House. In his induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame, he was heralded as one of the best entertainers country music ever produced. He died of congestive heart failure at age 85. Gallatin is just northeast of Nashville. This is Sumner Memorial Gardens, where we find the crypt of Conway Twitty, whose real name was Harold Jenkins. He was a musician who found his biggest success in the 1970s country music scene. His hits include You've Never Been This Far Before and Hello Darlin'.
You're just as lovely as you used to be.
He topped the Billboard Hot Country Song chart some 40 times in his career. Before being a country music star, Twitty actually found success in rock and roll and rockabilly, sometimes being compared to Elvis. And in the 2000s, Twitty was introduced to a new generation when he was featured on Family Guy. Conway Twitty died from an abdominal aortic aneurysm at the age of 59. He He was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1999. In part 5 of our viewers' special, we visited Graceland and the grave of Elvis Presley. Since that time, the family suffered a tragic loss. Elvis's grandson, Benjamin, the son of Lisa Marie Presley. His mother would describe his resemblance to his famous grandfather Elvis as just uncanny. By his teens, Benjamin showed inklings of following in his grandfather's footsteps. He was offered a record deal with Universal, but no music was ever produced. Ben struggled with substance abuse and depression, taking his own life in 2020 at just 27. We find ourselves now at Memorial Park Cemetery in Memphis. Before finding famous graves in these grounds, let's visit one of the ground's most striking and unique features, the Crystal Grotto. Back out to the grounds, not far from the Crystal Grotto, is the grave of Isaac Hayes. He was a singer and songwriter, a driving force in Southern soul. He wrote scores of songs for himself and other artists like Sam and Dave. One of his songs, Soul Man, is recognized as one of the most influential songs of the past 50 years. Hayes also wrote music for movies, most notably Shaft, which won him an Oscar.
Who's the black private dick that's a sex machine to all the chicks? Shaft! Damn right.
Isaac was also an actor, playing the Duke in Escape from New York and a Sneeze in Robin Hood Men in Tights. And you heard that distinctive resonant voice as Chef on South Park.
Hello there, children.
Hey, Chef.
Hayes died after suffering a stroke at age 65. Here too we find the grave of Charlie Rich. He was a country music artist known for incorporating a variety of genres into his music. He's perhaps best remembered for a pair of hits in the 1970s, Behind Closed Doors and The Most Beautiful Girl. He received numerous accolades, including being named Male Vocalist of the Year in 1973 by the Country Music Association. Charlie died in his sleep from a pulmonary embolism at the age of 62. Next up is the grave of a musician named Jimmy Griffin. He was a singer and songwriter known for his work with the 70s soft rock band Bread. In 1971, he won an Oscar for co-writing the song For All We Know for the movie Lovers and Other Strangers. Jimmy Griffin continued to perform with and write songs for various groups throughout his life, passing away from cancer at age 61. Another musician resting here is Marshall Grant. He's remembered as the bass player for Johnny Cash's backing band, the Tennessee Two. That was Marshall you heard playing bass in hits like I Walk the Line and Folsom Prison Blues. Johnny and Marshall would play together for decades, becoming dear friends. He lived to be 83 and was portrayed by Larry Bagby in the film Walk the Line. Let's make our way to the southwest section of the cemetery to find the grave of Red West. He went from being a bodyguard and confidant to Elvis Presley to Hollywood, where he'd find his place as a stuntman and actor. He began doing stunts for movies like Spartacus and shows like The Wild Wild West, in which he would also make several appearances as thugs or henchmen. This gradually led to more prominent roles, including as Sergeant Micklin in Black Sheep Squadron, and perhaps his best-known role as Red in Roadhouse. That's a wrap, is what is said when filming is completed. Written here too, when life is completed, which for Red West came after an aortic aneurysm at age 81. And that's a wrap for Tennessee. Let's visit the state that tops them all, in alphabetical order, Alabama. This is Elmwood Cemetery in Birmingham, where rests Eddie Kendricks. He was a singer and songwriter known for his distinctive falsetto singing style. He was one of the founding members of the Motown group The Temptations in the 1960s and would sing lead on some of their biggest hits, including Get Ready. As a solo artist, Kendricks had a hit in the song Keep On Truckin'. He was just 52 when he died from lung cancer. Also here is an actress named Anna Lee Carroll. also known as Boots Carroll. She was well known as a theater performer here in Alabama, and also made her mark in Hollywood. Her best known role is as Nurse Bradford in the 1968 film The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. She also made appearances on shows like Perry Mason. Boots lived to be 86. A trumpet marks the grave of a musician here by the name of Erskine Hawkins. He was a trumpet player and band leader of the big band era, dubbed the 20th Century Gabriel. He's remembered for co-composing the jazz standard Tuxedo Junction, which would become a hit during World War II. Hawkins lived to be 79 and was inducted into the Alabama Music Hall of Fame. One more Elmwood stop. Here is the grave of Paul Bear Bryant, considered by many as one of the greatest college football coaches of all time. He was head coach of the University of Alabama football team, racking up some 6 national championships and 13 conference championships during his tenure. He was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 1986, and the University of Alabama Stadium is named in his honor. In late 1982, Bryant retired from coaching. When asked what he would do next, he said, "Probably croak in a week." He wasn't far off. 4 weeks later, he died after suffering a heart attack at age 69. This is Mobile Memorial Gardens. Here we find the grave of Jean Byron. She was an actress best remembered for playing Natalie Lane, Patty Duke's mother, on The Patty Duke Show in the 1960s. She also had a recurring role in The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. On film, she'd be known for roles in B-movies like Invisible Invaders. Jean died from complications of hip replacement surgery at age 80. Cedar Hill Cemetery is in Scottsboro. This is where Lucille Benson is laid to rest. The plump, quirky actress with a heavy Southern accent was one of the distinctive character actresses of the 70s and 80s. Among her memorable roles are as Gas Mama in 1941 and Mrs. Elrod in Halloween 2. She also played Lily Sinclair in the TV sitcom Bosom Buddies. Lucille died from liver cancer at age 69. Our next famous grave is a unique one in the annals of Hollywood Graveyard. We find ourselves not in a graveyard, but at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville. This is the grave of Miss Baker. If asked on your 5th grade history test who the first astronaut the U.S. successfully launched into space was, you'd likely answer Alan Shepard. And you'd be right. Sort of. If we're counting other species, then the honor goes to one Miss Baker, a squirrel monkey. The intelligent and affectionate monkey boarded a Jupiter rocket on May 28, 1959, and for 16 minutes voyaged where no man, woman, or monkey ever had before, 300 miles above the surface of the Earth. After returning safely from space, Miss Baker and her co-monkey-naut, Abel, became national celebrities, gracing the cover of magazines. In 1971, Miss Baker moved to the Space Center here, where she entertained museum visitors and school children, and lived out her days like royalty. She died from kidney failure at age 27, and was buried here on the grounds of the museum. Back to the graveyards, our next Alabama stop is Oakwood Memorial Gardens in Huntsville. This is where the legendary Little Richard is laid to rest. He was a singer and songwriter, one of the most dynamic and flamboyant performers in the early days of rock and roll, soul, and funk. His frenetic piano playing and raspy shouted vocals laid the foundation for rock and roll, and would influence artists for generations to come. He had a smash hit in the 1955 song, Tutti Frutti. Other hits include Long Tall Sally and Good Golly Miss Molly. Little Richard's style and success would make him one of the first crossover black artists, reaching audiences of all backgrounds. In 1986, he would be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the inaugural group. Little Richard, the architect of rock and roll, passed away from bone cancer at age 87. Our last Alabama stop of the day is in Jasper and Oak Hill Cemetery. Here is the tomb of George Lindsay. He was an actor and comedian best known for his role as Goober Pyle, cousin of Gomer Pyle in The Andy Griffith Show and the spin-off Mayberry RFD. He would later play Goober again on Hee Haw. And if you can believe it, George Lindsay was actually Gene Roddenberry's first choice to play Spock, but he turned it down. Lindsay also lent his voice to a number of Disney animations, including as Trigger in Robin Hood and Lafayette in the Aristocats. George Lindsay died from heart failure at age 83. Hello to our friends in Mississippi. Not far from the Alabama border is Leakesville and Magnolia Cemetery. This is the grave of Bill Hicks, a comedian whose style was steeped in dark comedy and touched on a wide range of social issues. He toured extensively and built his most significant fan base in the UK. Bill was a frequent guest on talk shows like David Letterman and appeared on HBO's One Night Stand. He brought a sense of rock and roll to comedy, and today ranks among the stand-up comedy greats. His life and career were cut short by pancreatic cancer at just 32. Further west in Columbia is Rest Haven. Here we find football legend Walter Payton. He's considered one of the greatest football players to ever play the game, in a career that spanned 13 seasons with the Chicago Bears. He was a running back, and at one time held records for rushing yards, touchdowns, and many more. He was a 9-time Pro Bowl selectee and a Super Bowl champion with the Bears. In 1993, Walter Payton was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award, the NFL's honor for a player's volunteer and charity work, is named in his honor. Walter Payton died in 1999 from a rare liver disease at the age of 45. He was interred here with his parents. Let's find another football star here in Mississippi. Griffith Cemetery in Parentis is where Steve Air McNair is laid to rest. He was a quarterback in the NFL, playing for the Oilers, Titans, and Ravens between 1995 and 2007. He would lead his team to a Super Bowl in 2000. Air McNair was a 3-time Pro Bowl player and an MVP in 2003. A year after his retirement, McNair was shot and killed by his girlfriend, who then turned the gun on herself in a murder-suicide. He was 36. This is the grave of Eudora Welty at Greenwood Cemetery in Jackson. She was an author who wrote about the American South. Her 1972 novel, The Optimist's Daughter, won her the Pulitzer Prize in 1973. Her grave features a quote from The Optimist's Daughter. She won numerous honors throughout her life, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Eudora lived to be 92. Moving on now to Arkansas. We begin at the Campbell Family Cemetery in Billstown, where we find the grave of one of Arkansas's favorite sons, Glenn Campbell. He was a musician and actor who rose to popularity in the 60s and 70s. Campbell had a series of hit songs in this era, including Rhinestone Cowboy,
Like a rhinestone cowboy,
Wichita Lineman,
and the Wichita lineman.
and Southern Nights.
Southern nights, have you ever felt a southern night?
Glenn Campbell was also a familiar face on TV, appearing prolifically on all the various variety and talk shows, and even hosted his own show, The Glenn Campbell Good Time Hour. He also dabbled in acting, including playing LaBeef in the original True Grit. Decades later, he would co-write the song I'm Not Gonna Miss You for a documentary about his life. The song was nominated for an Academy Award in 2015. It focused on Campbell's diagnosis with Alzheimer's and his final tour. He died from the disease at age 81. Oak Ridge Cemetery is in Malvern. Here is the grave of Julie Adams. She was an actress best remembered today for playing Kay Lawrence in the classic monster movie Creature from the Black Lagoon. Other films include Bend of the River alongside Jimmy Stewart. On television, she had a regular role as Eve on Murder, She Wrote, Paula on the soap opera Capital, and Martha on The Jimmy Stewart Show. Julie Adams lived to be 92. Moving on to Cedar Grove Cemetery in Floral, where we find today's installment of Hollywood Graveyard Animals, cows. Let's head into this quiet cemetery to find the grave of Lisa Blount. As an actress, she would receive a Golden Globe nomination for her role as Lynette in An Officer and a Gentleman. She can also be seen in the cult horror film Prince of Darkness. Lisa was also a producer, winning an Academy Award for co-producing the short film The Accountant with her husband, Robert McKinnon. In October 2010, Lisa was found dead in her home from what was believed to have been the result of a blood disorder. She was 53. Next up is Oakland Cemetery in Clarksville. Here's the crypt of Daffy Dean. He was a pitcher in the major leagues, playing much of his career in St. Louis. During his rookie season, he pitched a no-hitter against the Dodgers. Daffy played alongside his brother, Dizzy, and together they'd win a World Series in 1934. Daffy died from a heart attack at age 67. Also here at Oakland is another man who lived to make us laugh, Ralphie May. He was a stand-up comedian who appeared on the first season of the reality show Last Comic Standing. He would finish in second place. Ralphie May would go on to appear on shows like The Tonight Show, and later recorded a number of Comedy Central specials and Netflix specials, like Girth of a Nation and Unruly.
Hey, my name is Ralphie May. Y'all been great. Thank you so much.
Ralphie would also dabble in acting, including appearing in For the Love of Money. In October 2017, he went into cardiac arrest and passed away. He was just 45 years old. Our journey through the quaint rural cemeteries of Arkansas brings us to Butler Creek Cemetery in Sulphur Springs. Here is the grave of Tommy Morrison. He was a professional boxer from 1988 to 2008 and held the WBO heavyweight title in 1993. Fans of the Rocky movies will also remember Tommy for appearing alongside Sylvester Stallone in Rocky V. In 1996, Morrison tested positive for HIV, which effectively ended his boxing career. The issue would be clouded when Morrison later insisted the tests were false positives and he never had the disease. He would even test negative years later and fight a couple more times. But for the last year of his life, he was bedridden, his mother saying he had full-blown AIDS. Morrison died after suffering cardiac arrest at age 44. Crosslawn Cemetery is in Wynne. Here lies Hugh Bones Taylor. He played professional football for the Washington Redskins from 1947 to 1955 and made the Pro Bowl in 52 and 54. After his career, he would coach, including at Arkansas State University and a number of NFL teams. Bones is a member of the Arkansas Sports Hall of Fame. He lived to be 69. One more Arkansas stop brings us to Co-op Prairie Cemetery in Mansfield. Here lies Arthur Honeycutt, an actor known for playing wise, grizzled, and old rural characters in films like El Dorado, Cat Ballou, and The Big Sky, the latter of which earned him an Oscar nomination. He made memorable appearances on television in shows like Bonanza and The Magical World of Disney. Arthur Honeycutt died from cancer at age 69. Our last state of the day is Louisiana, famous for uniquely scenic and magnificent cemeteries, like Metairie Cemetery, the great necropolis of the South. This is another star-studded cemetery we've visited in the past. Back again today for more historical figures, like Jim Garrison. He was a key figure in the investigation into JFK's assassination. He was a New Orleans district attorney who led efforts to prosecute Clay Shaw for conspiracy in the assassination, the only person ever brought to trial for the crime. Shaw was acquitted, and Garrison would later write a book about the investigation, On the Trail of the Assassins. The book would serve as source material for Oliver Stone's movie, JFK, in which Garrison was portrayed by Kevin Costner. Across the freeway from Metairie is Greenwood Cemetery. Here is the tomb of John Kennedy Toole. He was an acclaimed author who tragically would never know the success of his writings during his life. In the 1960s, he began writing his novel, A Confederacy of Dunces. After its completion, he submitted it to publishers who were enthusiastic about the book, but demanded seemingly endless revisions. John became discouraged and eventually shelved the book in his closet. His discouragement grew into depression and increasing paranoia. He went on a cross-country road trip that ended in Mississippi, where he committed suicide by attaching a garden hose to the exhaust pipe of his car. He was 31. His mother Thelma, also entombed here, discovered his manuscript for A Confederacy of Dunces and went on a crusade to have it published. She succeeded, the book finally being published in 1980, over a decade after John's death. The very next year, the book was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in Literature and has since become a masterpiece of American literature. Strolling along the streets lined with tiny houses for the dead, we find the eternal residence of Sam Butera. New Orleans has a rich musical heritage, particularly jazz music. Sam was a saxophone player, known for his raucous playing style and association with another jazz legend, Louis Prima. Butera played the 500 Club here in New Orleans regularly, but as the big band era wound down, he would find himself relocating to Vegas to perform with Prima as the leader of a band called The Witnesses. His R&B and pop style of big band jazz would permeate the Vegas nightclub scene for some 20 years. He died from pneumonia at age 81. Let's enjoy a little scenery here at Greenwood before we move on. This is the grave of Emile Meyer. He was an actor in the 50s and 60s known for playing tough and authoritative figures, like Rufus in Shane and Lieutenant Kello in Sweet Smell of Success. He shed his tough guy persona to play the kind-hearted priest, Father Dupree, in 1957's Paths of Glory. Meyer suffered from Alzheimer's later in life, passing away at age 76. Last up here at Greenwood is the grave of Jack Kramer. He played baseball in the major leagues from 1939 to 1951. Much of his career was spent with the St. Louis Browns. He played pitcher and would lead his team to the World Series in 1944. Kramer was also a three-time All-Star. He lived to be 77. Our next New Orleans cemetery is Holt Cemetery, a potter's field in New Orleans. In these grounds is the grave of Buddy Bolden. He was a musician who played cornet, which is similar to the trumpet. Bolden was a key figure in the early development of a new style of ragtime music, jazz, which would later become jazz. Bolden's band reached their peak between 1900 and 1907, and their improvisational style is considered by many as having originated jazz, leading Bolden to sometimes be called the father of jazz. Next generation jazz greats like Louis Armstrong would say of Bolden, he was a one-man genius ahead of them all. And etched in his stone is a quote from Jelly Roll Morton, who called him the blowingest man since Gabriel. At the age of 30, Buddy Bolden was diagnosed with schizophrenia and spent the remainder of his life in a mental institution. His death at age 54 was attributed to cerebral arteriosclerosis. Also here at Holt, we find Jesse Hill. He was an R&B and Louisiana blues singer and songwriter, best remembered for his 1960 hit, Oop Oop A Doo, which reached number 28 on the Hot 100 chart.
I want to tell you about Oop Oop A Doo. Baby, love in the boat.
The song would be a favorite for Mardi Gras and has been covered numerous times by other artists. Hill actually died in 1996 at age 63 from heart and renal failure. This is Mount Olivet Cemetery in New Orleans. In the mausoleum we find the crypt of Fats Domino. The pianist, singer, and songwriter is another of the legendary musicians who pioneered rock and roll. His 1949 single, The Fat Man, is sometimes cited as the first rock and roll single, and the first to sell more than 1 million copies.
They call me the Fat Man, 'cause I went to 100 pounds.
Later rock and roll legends like Elvis and the Beatles would cite Domino as a major influence. Other of Fats Domino's hits include Ain't That a Shame. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the inaugural group in 1986, and lived to be 89. Also here in the mausoleum is the crypt of Soulja Slim. He was a rap musician who rose to prominence in the late 90s, early 2000s. He had a #1 hit in the song Slow Motion, a collaboration with Juvenile. Soulja Slim, whose real name was James Tapp, died in 2003 after an assailant shot him. He was 26. No one has ever been convicted for his murder. One more musician to find here at Mount Olivet, who went by the name of Professor Longhair. He was a pianist and singer who performed New Orleans blues. He performed in the heyday of early rhythm and blues in the 1950s, and had something of a second career in the 70s through the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. His style combined elements of rumba, mambo, and calypso. Professor Longhair was inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame in 1981 and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1992. He died in his sleep from a heart attack at 61. Providence Memorial Park is in Metairie. Here is the crypt of James Booker. The self-proclaimed Bronze Liberace was one of the most flamboyant and accomplished rhythm and blues pianists to come out of New Orleans. He had his first hit in 1960's Gonzo and became a popular figure on the jazz circuit in the 70s. Booker would perform with greats like Dr. John and Ringo Starr, and even gave Harry Connick Jr. piano lessons. The piano prince of New Orleans died at just 43 from renal failure from chronic drug use. Also here at Providence is the world's greatest gospel singer, Mahalia Jackson. In a career that spanned some 40 years, Mahalia would become one of the most influential vocalists of the 20th century. She was instrumental in the development and spread of gospel music throughout the US, selling an estimated 22 million albums. One of her early hits was 1947's Move On Up a Little Higher.
Gonna move on up a little higher. Gonna meet my loving mother.
Mahalia would perform on television, in sold-out concert halls, and for heads of state worldwide. And she would use her powerful voice in support of the civil rights movement. Mahalia was inducted into the Blues and Rock and Roll Halls of Fame. The Queen of Gospel was actually born in 1911 and died from complications of surgery at age 60. This is Cherami Cemetery in Galliano, where rests Adi Petrie. He was the bass player and backup vocalist for the sludge metal band Acid Bath in the 90s. He also formed and played in the band Shroom, but in 1997 Adi and his parents were killed when their car was struck by a drunk driver. He was 26, and after his death Acid Bath disbanded. Lake Lawn Cemetery is our next stop. Heading into the mausoleum we find actor Michael David Morrison. His credits may have been few, but he did have a long-running role as Caleb Snyder in some 100 episodes of the soap opera As the World Turns in the 1990s. But his career was cut short by an accidental drug overdose at just 33. We're in Baton Rouge now and Rest Haven Cemetery. Here lies Pete Maravich. He remains college basketball's highest scorer with 3,667 points. He went on to play professionally for the Atlanta Hawks, New Orleans, and later Utah Jazz and the Boston Celtics. In his career, he was a 5-time NBA All-Star and 1977's NBA scoring champion. And he would become one of the youngest players inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Maravich died suddenly during a game in 1988, the result of an undetected heart defect. He was 40. And finally, our southern travels take us to Bluff Creek Cemetery. Here lies the legendary Donna Douglas. The Southern Belle began acting in the 50s, and in 1962 landed the role for which she'd be best known, referenced right here on her stone, playing the tomboyish Ellie Mae Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies.
Huh? You sure was right. Oh, Huggy, you don't have to wear boys' clothes to have fun with boys.
May, you promised me you wouldn't wrestle.
I ain't been wrestling.
Then what have you been doing in your ball gown?
Doing what I'm supposed to do, playing ball.
She would play Ellie Mae in some 273 episodes between 1962 and 1971. She made other notable television appearances as well, including in one of the most iconic episodes of The Twilight Zone, Eye of the Beholder. After the Beverly Hillbillies, Donna shifted her focus to other ventures, including gospel singing and writing. The beloved Donna Douglas died from pancreatic cancer at the age of 82. And that concludes our tour. What are some of your favorite memories of the stars we visited today? Share them in the comments below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more famous grave tours. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.